Welcome to the Rezolve.ai webinar series. Before we get started, let us quickly go over a few housekeeping items. We love interactive events, so please feel free to ask any question in the Q&A section, which can be accessed at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer those questions towards the end during the Q&A session. If there are more questions than we can answer during the session, we'll get back to you, we promise. This webinar is being recorded, and a recording link will be shared after the event. Thanks again for joining today, and let us get today's session started, and welcome our host.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Hey, Oliver, how are you doing?
I'm good, Manish. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. When we were thinking about doing this webinar about local government and digital transformation, I could think of no one better than Oliver as my co-host in this channel. So Oliver has been involved in digital transformation strategies from both private sector and public sector in government sector. He has done this, over last couple of decades. He has been a chief strategy officer for a bank, but he has also been, involved in local governments. So, welcome, Oliver. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah,
Oliver,
go ahead.
No, sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, I was going to say it's been an interesting journey. We've known each other for 10 years, and the roles change. You know, I used to be strictly on the business side, and now I've sort of acquired a little bit more of the tech angle on this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember you as Chief Strategy Officer at Associated Bank, and you were trying to drive the bank in a particular direction, and that was a phenomenal and very strategic job. And then since then, you have been helping local governments with the initiative. So this is fantastic. So let me ask you a question, though. You know, why did you move from that side, from private sector to public sector? What made you, take that right turn, so to say, at that point of time?
Yeah. Working with a single company on strategy is very rewarding. 2010 helping turn around Associated Bank. But if you are really in strategy, at some point, an organization needs time to breathe and execute. And I'm sort of a restless soul. So my goal was to start a consulting firm, which I did in 2016. And it was traditional strategy consulting. And my first client was once again a bank, and I was working on the future of retail banking. And in the context of that engagement, I say I met AI, and I met a lot of other modern technologies, and I realized I had to step up my involvement with technology in a big way. And as part of these conversations, I also began to speak to some government leaders. I remember a conversation with a county leader, and I told him about a grassroots effort that we were starting and that we wanted to raise awareness about digital transformation in Wisconsin. And his first response was, "That's great. I'm so happy that you're doing that. See you next time." And I said, no, I can't do that. You have to do that, And he sat back and he said, what can I do? And I said, that's the right question. That's exactly the right question. So I kind of fell into that a little bit, but it evolved into a wonderful partnership. This was Troy Streckenbach, Brown County executive. And there's sort of three drivers to me that really got me engaged in this sector. The first one is nobody can dodge what's happening in digital transformation. No government, no business, no individual. We're all going to be subjected to this massive change. I call it the greatest shift in human activity in history. Everybody's life, business activity is going to be impacted. And government, we often don't think about it that way. We think that the technology companies are at the heart of this. And they are in a way because they're creating the possibilities. But government has multiple roles to play in that. And we'll get into a bit more detail on that. And then what really motivated me, having come from California to Wisconsin, here in Wisconsin, and I believe it's true for many other parts of the country, things evolve a little slower, generally lagging in technology adoption. And so if we can get Wisconsin counties, Wisconsin government to sort of embrace this notion, there's a real chance to jump ahead of the curve. So that's what got me focused on local government.
Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing up this slide. You know, this is one of my key talking points here. When I started my journey, 2016, I knew about the things sort of on the bottom here, you know, technology, things that most of us know about. And then I learned about AI, and then about blockchain, and then about IoT, and it just kept on coming and kept on coming, and it hasn't really stopped. You know, every month there's a new angle on this, and I realized I was not the only one who was lacking in understanding. Because when I asked others, you know, what are you doing about AI? It was mainly shrugging shoulders here. And so there's this massive challenge of change that is coming, that is inevitable. And the question on my mind is, what are we going to do about it, right?
And if I may just add a point, we are a technology company, right? And we are in the middle of AI. And even for us, right, we have to actually have people looking at what is going on in terms of AI disruption every month and every year. If we take our eye off the ball, we'll lose a bunch of innovation that are happening, because you're right, there's the speed of innovation so huge that if we are having difficulty, right, I mean, we have to have an effort to keep tab on it. Just imagine someone in local government, how are they going to figure this out on their own? It's not easy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I have a question. So when you said that, you know, maybe the technology companies bring the platforms and whatnot, and government have a role. So what kind of role do you think, therefore, the local governments have?
Yeah, so I think there's three. The first one is sort of on the legislative and regulation side, and that's where, especially here in the United States, we are way behind. Now, we typically would not look to local governments, right? We would say, you know, there has to be federal legislation, maybe state legislation. There have to be guidelines around that. But, you know, take the city of San Francisco. They issued an order that basically prohibits the use of facial recognition software, one of the first municipalities to create that. So you do have some means, but even at the local level, you need to understand, and you need to think about that. If you were to decide to somehow run AI over the data that you have available to you at the local government level, you need to really understand what rights do consumers have to their data? You know, we individually don't really have a lot of rights, for example, to our Facebook data or to our Google data. That's different in Europe. So how would you do that in government? There's some interesting examples from Europe, how they decentralize access to data. And if, in fact, you do involve AI and it makes decisions, who's liable? You know, are you going to then blame it on the software company that created the AI or on the project manager that implemented it? Or do you then have to take accountability? And in that context, what is even the ethical framework for using AI or other technologies? These are such important decisions. And until we have a more robust framework that is being created by government, you know, there's going to be a vacuum. So there's a really important role here to play. And as I said, until that framework comes into play, local governments may have to step in.
Yep.
The second role is that people are users. I mean, governments are massive users of technology, with all the departments, all the agencies that they represent. And so, you know, just as that, you are right in the heart of it. You are a consumer that rivals the size of the private sector almost. So some questions here are, you know, how are you going to interface with your citizens? Are you going to make it hard for them to get a service fulfilled? Or are you going to make it easy? You know, as banking gets more convenient, insurance gets more convenient, everything gets more convenient, everything can be done online. Is government going to move along with that? If you've had historical failures or historical successes, how do you learn from that? And how do you share those learnings with others and so forth? So there's a lot of angles here that just even as a user of technology, this is a very relevant government discussion. And then the final angle to me is the role of governments in economic development, right? So governments often set the tone. If I create an innovation-minded tone in my community, in my county, in my city, then that can play a big role. In Brown County, for example, Brown County invested in fiber, and that fiber allowed schools and government agencies to have better resources. A business park was connected to that fiber network, and that caused a lot of investment. So there's investment in infrastructure and participation in creation of a regional ecosystem. So you take all of these three angles together, and yeah, you have to conclude that governments are really central to the adoption of digital transformation. They may just not yet have that mindset. Right?
Yep, I agree with you. I mean, they can just be consumer of it, but they can also set the tone on they can be a stakeholder. Maybe they have more power in this whole process than they realize. So I
Mm-hmm.
have a related question now. So we know that you work with a lot of local governments in the state of Wisconsin, and this was an initiative called Digital County Effort, if I'm not wrong. So what can you tell us about this, and what were the learnings from this effort?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier this conversation with the Brown County executive, right? And once he sat back in his chair and he said, "What can I do?" I said, that's exactly the right question. So let's brainstorm about that. And first, he gave me a lecture about what all happens in the county, from the sheriff's office, the library, the zoo, the parks and recreation, health and human services. The list went on and on and on and on. And I was a little bit overwhelmed. And then I said, well, imagine you could get some of these folks to take what they do today and reimagine it in light of use of new technologies like AI or blockchain or IoT, right? And he said, oh my God, that sounds like a big deal. It would be great if we can get there, but I don't want to do it alone. So he reached out to the Wisconsin Counties Association, and we, with their sponsorship, we opened it up to all counties in Wisconsin, and ultimately 12 came together. Over 150 people came, and these were not just CIOs or county administrators. We had identified originally 15. Ultimately, we were able to execute 14 use cases from involving the sheriff's office, involving road maintenance, and so forth. And we brought people in who worked in these areas every day. We had deputies, we had ambulance drivers, we had snowplow drivers, and we paired them up with technologists. And then basically we first identified, so what is it that you do? What is the use case? What is the activity? And now how could we utilize technology to do that? And we had one event focused specifically on use cases related to AI, one event specifically on blockchain, and one event specifically on the Internet of Things. So here are some of the examples, right? Road maintenance, for example. Today, still a lot of teams are out there driving their roads and sort of visually inspecting, and they swear that that's the only way to really understand and rate the quality of the roads. But you can utilize sensors, you can utilize cameras, vehicles that are driving these roads all the time can collect information. So there's a lot you can do. Winter road maintenance. Roads are being plowed. If there's a snowstorm coming in, and we have quite a few of them here in Wisconsin, roads are being plowed according to a certain pattern because the drivers need to learn that pattern. But if the snow is coming in east to west or west to east or north to south, it actually makes a huge difference in what order you should be doing that. So how can you use weather predictions and satellite information and road sensor information and all of that information, right? So I could go on and on and on for hours talking about these use cases. In fact, if you go to the Wisconsin Counties Association website, you can download this, like a 200-page report. And that was fascinating. This was creating engagement, creative imagination of what is possible with technology at a scale that was previously unheard of here in Wisconsin.
No, this is and this sounds like a very creative process where a lot of people involved sitting in a room trying to figure out, imagine what the next generation of local government is going to look like. So tell me, once you went through the process, what happened, right? Did some of the counties take it to the next level? What happened next?
Yeah, so there was a little bit of a gap, right? Because whenever you push an organization that is otherwise already very engaged, and then you come to the end of the process, everybody takes a big breath and like, oof, now we finally have time to do our day job, right? But two counties specifically took up the process and said, let's go to the next level. What comes next, right? So in the digital county effort, we had really worked ground up. We had identified use cases, but you can't just go sort of nilly-willy and start implementing against use cases. You need to have an umbrella under which you agree on that. And counties are extremely diverse. I mentioned earlier all the different departments. There are elected officials that don't even technically report to the county executive. Some counties don't even have a county executive. They are smaller than that. So what we wanted to do is, as a next step, is what does that umbrella look like? What does the digital vision for the county look like? And recognizing that within the county, you have the private sector, you have the education sector, you have other municipalities, right? So we created a community-based effort and identified through that dialogue in the community, as well as dialogue within the county with the Board of Supervisors and employee groups, what that digital vision could be. In parallel, we picked one use case from the digital county effort and advanced that a little bit further. And then the goal of this was to say, can we commit you, county, to a path, right? So that was sort of the next step in this journey.
Okay. And what was some of the outcomes from this process? What kind of outcomes came out?
Yeah, so I'll show you some of the things here. This is now taken directly from the Brown County presentation that was given by Troy and others at the end, right? So the first part is a realization that you need to educate the community, and frankly, you need to educate your own employees. Why do you even need that? Did we just waste a bunch of time, or is this actually critical? And so here you have to first tie it back to the world is changing. There's evolution happening all around us, impacting us, and we're not just going to stand by and watch that. We're going to do something about it, right? And so the first commitment here was we're going to do this in collaboration between government and the community. Second, we want to capture specific opportunities for our region to prosper and grow, right? So again, not just doing that to become more efficient, but to put a positive spin on that and use this as an engine of growth to promote the region. And we want to be a leader. This is, there's a certain pecking order. I'm sure that's everywhere. So the biggest counties, they usually determine how things go, and then come the next biggest, and at the very bottom come the smaller counties. But here it's like, let's jump ahead of the pecking order, and can we establish ourselves as a leader where typically you would say Madison or Milwaukee have to be the leaders in our state. So that was the why. Why are we even doing that? And articulating that and making sure that was bought in by the community was an important step. The next step then, or this is a great illustration, right? This was not just done with 5 or 10 people from the county. We invited the education sector, the private sector, the Green Bay Packers, the large financial institutions to come to the table and be part of that dialogue. And I took them through a specific methodology called dimensional visioning so that we could take that vast array of thoughts and ideas and sort of channel it into these specific statements. But having all of these voices in the room was, in my opinion, was critical to really make this a community-based effort.
So what was the outcome of all this, right? Like after you did all this, I'm sure there was, specific outcomes that came out, right?
Yeah, so you have, on the one hand, you have sort of the outcomes on paper, right? So this is, for example, the Brown County Digital Vision Statement. Mm-hmm. And you could say, oh, you know what? A good marketing agency could have written that in a couple of days. That's true. But then it's just words, right? This was not one smart mind writing this down and wow, great words. This was the result of a multi-month-long process with 50 people involved, all the different constituencies, and ultimately agreeing on that this is what it is about. And there's important concepts in here. We will reimagine what we do. We embrace digital technology, but we do it in a way that is inclusive and respectful to our citizens, right? So we're not going to just like grab all your data and monetize it, right? We're going to be inclusive and respectful, considering the different constituents in the community. So there's sort of every word carries meaning, and the people who were involved understood the meaning behind that. So then, yeah, so there's the vision statement, and then there was the mission statement. And, I don't want to sort of harp on all these words. That is just words. But what happened as a result of that is the county executive now also had credibility in the community. So one of the initiatives, for example, that he wanted to push was sort of the future of mobility, right? Can we bring smart autonomous transportation to Green Bay? The only pilot project in Wisconsin to that point was in Madison. And, normally if a county executive just calls on a topic like that, people would scratch their heads like, don't you have other things to do? But against the backdrop of this effort, he all of a sudden had credibility. So when he launched this mobility effort, everyone was there. Everyone in the community who was somebody was there, and we had the experts come in and explain it. And again, as a community, we learned that. So credibility came with having the digital vision and mission statement. And by the way, to be able to say, we are one of 2 counties in Wisconsin who's actually done that was also sort of a badge of honor, right?
Yep. No, I see this. The government sector, or for that matter, any other large organization, is not very easy to steer in a particular direction. And
Right.
the speed at which that these changes are happening, I think having the right mindset is the first step. Otherwise, everyone will question why go there, right?
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about what happened after that. They created this, vision statement and mission statement, and they got into right mindset. What is it doing now? What is going on after that?
Yeah, so as you can see on the bottom, so this all happened in 2019, right? So we could now all blame it on the pandemic that things didn't move forward in the way they should have. But there was, even before the pandemic, there was a realization. It's like, holy cow, to really become this digital county, to really take advantage of all these technologies, that's a ton of work. First of all, just even identifying all the use cases, prioritizing them, finding the right vendors that are aligned with them, having people manage this process. There wasn't a position necessarily to do that. And where do you find the funding for all of that, right? So that created a little bit of a sort of a moment of very sober realization. It's like, wow, we are really not yet set up for that. And one of the big questions that then was in the room was, well, are there any things among these choices that we have here that would actually allow us to maybe make this self-funding, right? Could we streamline the administration and lower our expenses to then, use some of those savings and reinvest them in other technology opportunities? And I think that's sort of a space that you have some experience in as well. So I would just play it back to you to say, when you have these conversations with government officials, where do you see some of these opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. For all these, especially, after pandemic, I think everyone is going to be laser sharp in terms of what they see as an opportunity and what is the return on that opportunity and how is it getting funded and whatnot. So before I go into that, so our company Rezolve.ai basically help with the services part of it. How do you manage services, internal, external services? And, we have kind of, I'm going to talk about some of the trends that we are seeing, technology trends that we are seeing, which is going to allow local governments to become more efficient, at the same time create savings and create automation, and then create foster a culture of change that we are looking for. So we do not solve the entire problem, right? But we solve part of the problem. And I can talk about what is happening that local government officials need to pay attention to. So for example, and I'm sorry, I think I missed a slide here. I'm going to I'm going to leave it here for 30 seconds, but I think you talked about that. So the things that I wanted to talk about was, you know, think about this. we are now all getting used to a conversational interface, right? We at homes we use Google Home and Alexa and whatnot, so we all are kind of getting tuned to using a conversational interface. So not everything has to be a long email, and that's how things are going to get done. We are okay in text. Younger generation is much more okay in text, and a lot of us are okay in not talking but getting things done. The second thing which has happened, trend that we all need to pay attention to, is that collaborative tools, right? Everyone, like we are all on Zoom right now. There are a bunch of people, I use Teams all the time when I'm not doing Zoom. And a lot of organizations have taken a huge shift towards that. So the question is, what does it mean for me, right? If you're a CIO or CTO in a local government, you'll say, yes, this is happening, but what does it mean to me? And this is something to pay attention to, because this means a lot of things are getting enabled in a different fashion that they were enabled so far. What we call that is teamsification. This is a new term that we have kind of coined. And what it means is that now you can bring your internal and external processes to teams, right? And by the way, AI driven, like our company is a AI driven solution on Teams. But think your help desk can be on Teams, your change management can be on Teams, your micro learning system can be on Teams, your employee onboarding, offboarding, some kind of processes related to citizens can be on Teams. Your policies and procedures, all that can be accessed quickly via Teams. And you can do survey and conduct surveys within employees, and maybe even for customers and citizens outside. So why I'm harping on Teams is because this is a huge change that is happening, and Teams is there in all local and state governments. We have seen that. So how do we use that? How do we now? It's like mobility, right? When 2005, 2010, a lot of mobile apps were coming and everyone was talking about it. I want to kind of point out to people today that this is what is about to happen. And in general, if you think about how we used to run processes, they were very difficult. People didn't know how to do, for some for custom app I have to call someone, for self services I have to go find in SharePoint. If I have to call facilities, what is the number for facilities? So you are going to look your left and right and ask someone, right? So these were the difficulties in old time. The channels were broken, the processes were different, everything was difficult. And basically I call this enterprise friction, right? There was what I like to call enterprise friction in everyday life. Now you can change that. So, we call this AI service management, right? AI powered service management. So essentially what it means is, no matter what kind of issue you have, you come to Teams and maybe an app like ours, and then you ask and seek help and get the information and go to a help desk, or reach out to self-service asset, or figure out the rules and policies all from one place. And then there are people sitting behind the picture, and there's automation sitting behind the picture, and there's processes hidden behind the system which are going to help them. But they are not, you don't need to know everything, right? You can just ask some app in Teams, and that app in Teams in turn is going to help you figure things out. It's all conversational. You can just go to Teams and start chatting, and you can even do micro learning on Teams. Just imagine if you don't know something, micro learning just get assigned to you, and now you're looking at it and you can understand what it is, right? So it's, I know this is not not everything, but we look at a sliver of the problem, and our problem that we look at is how do we make employees and these organizations more efficient so that they can take larger initiative, the kind of initiatives that you talked about.
Mhm.
So with that, I think I'm going to pause, Oliver, and see if there are any questions. I think we are pretty much towards the end of the time. We actually bang on time. So if there are any quick questions, I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions. Not yet. So I'm going to I think we are towards the end, so we can take some questions offline. You can reach out to us over emails, or just write to us at our website, and we'll be very happy to take that. Thank you so much for attending this webinar. We really appreciate it, Oliver. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Have a
Thanks.
great day.